Hello. Welcome back to Reads of an Apple. My name is Stacy, and today I put myself through the ringer. Don't ask me why, because today I'm going to be ranking, as you could probably tell from the thumbnail and the title and all of that stuff, Sarah J. Maas's books. Now, before we get into it, I am a newer reader to Sarah J. Maas. I have obviously seen her make the rounds on BookTok and Bookstagram and BookTube and all the places for quite a while now. But I never really got into YA. So I just never picked her up. Oh my goodness. Excuse you, little miss. She just has to be a part of things. I kind of skipped reading. Like, I went from chapter books to, like, adult books. So I never really got into YA, and I feel like when YA really had its, I guess, formation or its strengthening as its own, like, genre or age group in books, I was past the targeted age group at that point. Like, I was in late high school and college, like when Twilight was coming out and that kind of a thing. Okay, all right. Okay, we're doing this now. So I never read Sarah J. Maas. Just because all I knew was that she was young adult, new adult, that type of situation. And now she's yelling at the pillows because she jumped on the side of the couch and knocked the pillows over on top of herself. She's just full of it today, I guess. But anyway, yeah, you are full of it. So, I want to say it was March, we had the SJM-along be created thanks to Jenn at the Book Refuge. She had various number of hosts throughout the year plus read along, and what we did was we read through Sarah J. Maas's backlist. I believe there was like one Catwoman book or something out there. But I didn't read that. That wasn't a part of the SJM-along. But we reread in publication order outside of the novellas from The Assassin's Blade. So we wrapped it up a couple months ago. I can't remember how long it's been. But about halfway through, I had it in my mind to do a ranking video and just give my overall thoughts of SJM now that I have officially read her. And I have a lot of thoughts, but you're probably here for rankings. So we will start teasing rankings, but I'm gonna make you hold off for the big boys. What we're gonna talk about first are the novellas in the Assassin's Blade. I have really pretty dust jackets for the Throne of Glass series that you will be seeing as I discuss all of the books. And I will have the shop linked down below. I love the artwork. I think they also sell the artwork as just like art prints if you didn't want them as dust jackets, or at least they had them that way in the pre-order, but there it's just, the front is just landscape as you saw, and then okay, so there is the Assassin's Blade. Now for this one, I did do a little graphic, just kind of going through them in order, and we will switch to the graphic because me holding up the Assassin's Blade doesn't the entire time doesn't really help differentiate between the books. So first off, this is the prequel novella. I'm sure everyone here probably already knows, and you are an SJM stan yourself, and you are here to see my takes on it. In case you are not, This is the bind up of 5 prequel novellas for her Throne of Glass series, but I believe it was released after the series had started. I'm not 100% sure where production-wise it fit in the release schedule or publication-wise. The way that we read these during the SJM-along is usually we'd have a Throne of Glass book and then 1 or 2 prequel novellas for that section. So let's just get into them. Like I said, there are 5 prequel novellas. So we're going to go from 5th to 1st. So my 5th favorite, least favorite, because let's be honest, any of these books at the bottoms of the list are still books that I gave 4 or more stars to. So I still enjoyed these books. It's kind of like how I feel about Taylor Swift, because there's not really a bad Taylor Swift song in my own opinion, but you have lesser favorites. You have not top tier songs for you, but still, even one of her lower tier songs is still better than a lot of other songs that are out there. So that's kind of how I feel about SJM. So I'm spoiling that a little bit, but I get the hype. I am on the hype train. I mean, obviously I doled out the money, as you saw, for hardcover. I don't typically even buy hardcover books, but I had to get the hardcovers when they redid the Throne of Glass, and then I got dust cover jackets for them because I'm now on the train. I'm now on the hype train. But back to the prequel novellas. I just wanted to throw that little disclaimer out there, because even if they're at the bottom of the list, that does not mean I didn't love them or appreciate for what they brought to the series. But anyway, number 5 in the prequel novellas, I'm going to give it to The Assassin and the Pirate Lord. This is kind of the start of the prequel novellas, and we see here where Aelin, or well, I guess technically she's Selena at this time, takes out the Pirate Lord, and we see her kind of have dealings with him in the main series, and this is where basically we find out what exactly happened between them. And he was running a slaver operation, and she pretty much ruined it. She let a bunch of slaves go. She pretty much destroyed a bunch of his island, and we also see her team up with Sam here, which is fun. So Sam kind of gets dragged into her nonsense. But it was fun. It was really fun to see. This, I feel like, especially this first prequel novella, definitely had the YA kind of young and reckless vibes that the first couple books of the Throne of Glass series had. And it didn't hit me as much just because she did feel so young in this. But, I mean, I loved her taking a stand. And I loved her being like, no, we are going to not allow slavery to happen under our watch. And then we have some situation where Arabin may or may not be a part of the slave trade. And so there's something going on there that's really, I feel like this prequel novella we see in the beginning, kind of knowing her history, having read the books, I feel like this is like that final nail. Maybe not the final nail, but this is like, I don't know. I'm like mixing up my metaphors here. This is the straw that broke the camel's back. We'll go with it that way. Like, this was the piece where she was just like, when this situation happened, she is like, she had frustrations with Arabin, but she still kind of felt beholden to him. But this is the straw that really made her second guess and start to analyze and really look at her relationship. Now, this isn't the one that caused to that final, like, I'm done with him situation. But this was like the triggering point to get to her finally trying to step away from him. And so I feel like to have the prequel novella start here was such a smart move, because we really kind of see her start to reach her end point with putting up with Arobyn's crap. I'm sorry, she is just on a tear this morning. Okay, so we will move on. So my second to least favorite of the prequel novellas is actually the final prequel novella, The Assassin and the Empire, for a couple things. I knew it was going to be heart-wrenching. This is where we see Sam's death. This is where we see, at the very end of this prequel novella, this is where we see Selena get carted off to Endovir to work in the salt mines as a slave. Oh, this was really heart-wrenching, and I feel like there were moments of growth that we saw in her character and just in her understanding of the world, and in her understanding of how beholden she feels to Arobyn and how she doesn't really have to feel that way anymore. But in this one, I feel like she kind of backtracked a little bit on there, but I also kind of understand why, because she needed to regress a little bit to make that crazy decision that ended up being what cost her to go to Endovir. And when I finished this prequel novella, so I will say the final two prequel novellas, I ended up reading more recently after the SJM-along was finished, because I just didn't get to them in time in line when we were supposed to read them. And when I finished this one, I've been wanting to reread the last couple books of the series anyway, but when I got to this one, I kind of want to reread all of Throne of Glass now. So even though it's my second to least favorite, it still, I feel like, was good, and it makes me want to reread the whole series. So take that for what it's worth. Okay, then the middle book of the 5 is going to be The Assassin and the Healer. This is the second prequel novella. I enjoyed this one. This one kind of felt like an in-betweener. However, I feel like after the fact, I may have wanted to put it up higher, but I tried to not let too much of what happens in the full series affect my rating here, or at least my tier ranking here, because we see her meet Irene. And Irene is amazing, and she's one of my favorite heroines of the series. Oh, but we see her meet Irene, and she is basically the one that gives Irene the financial means to make it to, like, the healer's, I want to say cottage, but it's not a cottage, college, and really kind of set her on her path, which then comes back to her. I mean, that's what's great, is that you see, especially in these first 3 prequel novellas, you see her have interactions with people that then come back into her life once she takes the throne and takes the onus of becoming her true self, which is Aelin Galathynius. And I love that. But I thought this was great. This one was definitely a little more angstier because Irene is not in a good situation when they meet. And, you know, your heart just kind of breaks for Irene. And Aelin is more, I feel like, more kind of the side character in this one. Or Selena at this time. Because this is more focusing on, she runs into Irene here while she's on the way to the Red Desert as for training / punishment because of what happened in the Pirate Lord. So this is kind of a transitional book for Selena, but you do see her help out Irene, and I feel like I love that we had a prequel novella for Irene. I did read this one along in the SJM-along, and I was like, I really hope we get to see Irene again. And her book, I mean, it's practically her book, let's be honest. was great. Fantastic. I loved it. Okay, so my second favorite of the prequel novellas is number 4, which is The Assassin and the Underworld. And I had to rate this high because even though we knew it had a sad ending, I knew it had a sad ending going into this. I knew it wasn't going to be an HEA for Selena and Sam. This is really where we get to see Selena and Sam's relationship take that next level, and we see them really connect. This is after she comes back from the Red Desert, and we kind of have both of them dealing with their situation and coming to terms with their feelings for one another, and Selena's struggle with accepting what Sam says is truth. And yeah, I just remembered something I wanted to chat about, but maybe I'll wait and talk about it. There's something that happens in the 5th prequel novella that comes back in Kingdom of Ash that totally broke me. But I'm going to talk about it in Kingdom of Ash instead of going back to the Underworld, back into the Empire. So I will move on. My brain is just everywhere. I'm sorry. There's just so much to these books, and sometimes they blend together a little bit. So if I get anything in the wrong book, I'm sorry. But in the Underworld, this is really that final nail where, Selena's done. She pays off Arabin and she gets her own apartment, and she invites Sam to move in with her. And we see them really living together in the 5th prequel novella. But here is where that really kind of happens. We also get to see Lysandra a lot in this and her situation. And this is kind of leading up to the selling of her virginity, which this made me want to read the scene where she kills Arabin again, because he's just so horrible. But it was just really good, and I enjoyed kind of seeing Selena start to break out of Selena and starting to come back to being Aelin again. And I really enjoyed this, although it was really sad because we get Arabin playing her again. And there's a scene where she thinks she's gonna die because she's like trapped in a gate, and all the sewer waters are like cleaning everything out. They like dam everything up, and then they release it so it like purges everything in the sewers. And she was down there, and she can't get the grate open, and she tells Sam to take her body back to Terrasen. And I was just like, what? Oh my gosh. It just, especially knowing, because at that point she wanted nothing to do with who she was. She was not willing to accept or even deal with the grief that she had over all of the loss that she sustained from her, who she really was. And it just, I don't know, this prequel novella just really got me. But as you can probably tell, my favorite prequel novella of the 5 is The Assassin and the Red Desert. This is the middle prequel novella. I think this is the longest of the 3. I really loved this. I loved that we got to see Selena go through a training situation when she was like the assassin of a Darlin, and learning new techniques and really kind of struggle. And yes, she's definitely young in this. She's definitely headstrong. But I liked seeing how even though she was headstrong and, kind of impatient with her training, there was still that coreness of doing what's good and doing what's right and not turning on your friends even when they hurt you. And it just swept me away. I loved the situation. I love learning about the assassins that come from the Red Desert, and just it was so interesting. And like, you have to go to the oasis and walk through the desert and bring water back, and the way that they train them. And then when she ends up training with the like High Master himself, it just was so interesting because we got to see like a different type of culture in this world. And just seeing Selena kind of thrown in and, you know, with her cocky attitude and then kind of get taken down a couple rungs, but then take what she learned and come back up on the top, which we see her use what she learns there later. And it's just like so vindicating. Like, I just loved it. It definitely was my favorite. And I just had so much fun. And I feel like this one, I mean, you can kind of see her flirting with people, but what made this one for me is the friendships that she manages to form with the other people, both training there from other places and the, like, I guess, native peoples who are from that area, and they're also training there. But I think about this prequel novella a lot, and it's hard to say exactly what it is that really speaks to me the most as I've been rambling on about it here, but there's just something about the storytelling in this specific one that really hit me, and I feel like this one is probably the one where we see the most growth from Selena when it's not like a full-length book. So I just had to give it to this one. As soon as I read this one, I put it at the top of my list. And then at that point, the final two novellas were trying to see, we're pinned up against this one. And they just didn't quite make the cut. But as I said, I loved all of them. Overall, I would probably give The Whole Assassin's Blade a 4.5 star rating, if not a 5-star rating, because I just had so much fun with it. And it was really interesting to kind of go back and see the situations that kind of led to Selena finally like pushing against Arabin and ending up in Endovir. As horrible as it sounds, but you know, but you gotta fall to the ground to be able to pull yourself back up, right? Okay. All right. There is that. So before we get into ranking the full-size books, I want to chat a little bit about just my thoughts on SJM as a person. I feel like her world building, I mean, you can definitely tell. What's interesting about reading this in publication order is you can definitely see a growth of her as a writer. I am someone who typically, like when you look at first books from people, I typically don't look, I rate more off of enjoyment. So if there's weird word choices or overuses in words, unless it's like super obvious or like a super funky word, I usually don't notice it, or it just, not that I don't notice it, it just doesn't hinder my enjoyment of a book. But I have to say, SJM, and I don't know why I keep correlating her, but she is like the Taylor Swift of books. She has Easter eggs and plot twists, and we don't know the reasoning behind things that she does. And I feel like I should name this video why Sarah J Maas is the Taylor Swift of books, but maybe I will, maybe I won't. You know. But I enjoy her world building, and as a Swiftie, I enjoy the Easter egging, and I enjoy finding hints and clues and trying to piece together how these books may or may not have connections between the series and the hints of what will happen in later books. I definitely, like I mentioned, I want to reread Throne of Glass, but I honestly want to reread all of these because what was interesting during the SJM-along is we had two groups of people, really. We had the new readers like myself, and then we had people who were rereading the series. And it was really interesting because I feel like as the rereaders in general, picked up a lot more little nuances or a lot more little hints because they knew what was coming. But as a new reader, I didn't pick up on those. Like, I picked up on them, like, after the fact. Like, when I would read a later book, I'd be like, oh, that was mentioned previously, kind of a thing. But I didn't necessarily get the full nuance of the references when it was mentioned earlier, or how the nuances of how when something happens, it is leading to the building up of this other thing. And so I definitely do plan on, let's be honest, rereading probably all of these books. At the very least, I want to reread the first 2 Crescent Cities before the third one comes out next year, which is super exciting. We got that exciting announcement as the SJM was coming to a close. And so I am now officially like, I can join in on the excitement of the announcement of a Sarah J Maas release, which is fun. And I have already pre-ordered my book. I pre-ordered it as long as it was when it was first announced. I don't know. I enjoy her stories, but what I love about her writing, and we'll really kind of dig into this more with, I feel like, her Throne of Glass series is, I mean, Aelin is our heroine. She is our main character. She is number 1. But her side characters are so fleshed out, and her worlds are so realized. They're so cinematic, and you can just picture yourself in this world, and you can just picture these characters, and you can almost maybe not guess what they're going to do, but you can tell, like, everyone is just so individualized that you know how they're going to react to certain things before, like, you actually see them react to them, just because they're so fully realized as full characters, not even just side characters. The way that she does her heroines, I just love the way that they are so strong. But Aelin and Feyre are kind of like her 2 big ones. They are definitely strong. They're fighters. They're warriors. Say what you will about them. But what I also really enjoy is the diverseness of the other side characters. Like, we see them being strong in other ways that aren't, we're going to go out and be battling and fighting kind of a way. And, you know, we see them also go through very traumatic things, very emotionally damaging things, very physically damaging things, and her heroes too. But her heroines are what really gets it for me. But I mean, and not to take away anything from her heroes, I feel like every one of her heroes could be a book boyfriend. Any one of her male, I'm not going to call them side characters, but like male characters that are friends with, that are in like the core group. So think like Cassian, I mean, he's kind of his own hero in his own. So that's where it gets. For Throne of Glass, we've got Dorian, we've got Kale, we've got. I'm spacing on names. I mean, Rowan's like our male main character because he's Aelin's partner. Oh my gosh! But we've got the other members of his cadre, and I'm completely freaking blanking on names now, and I can't believe it, but we've got like Edian, her cousin. Who is Lysandra paired with? Why can I not think of his name? It's just gonna drive me nuts. Or not Lysandra. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this. Okay. I'm like so excited that my brain is just going miles a minute, and now I'm losing names. But I hope you understand what I'm saying. Where like even her male, like any of her like male characters that's not like on the evil side or on the bad side, that like we fully see like horrible evil people, because there are some people that switch sides, or are kind of forced into being on the bad side. So even then, I feel like any of her like secondary character. I'm going to call them secondary characters instead of side characters, because I feel like because there's side characters and then secondary characters and then the main characters. So I feel like any of her male secondary characters could be book boyfriends for anyone and everyone. One of them actually is one of my favorites, and that is Dorian. I was on Team Dorian from the beginning. I didn't know what I was getting into. I was super worried it was going to be a love triangle in the beginning of Throne of Glass, and I disliked Cale. He eventually turned it around, but I did not like Cale for the first few books of Throne of Glass. But I don't know, there's something about her heroines that just really speaks to me, and I love that. From what I've heard, because obviously I wasn't paying attention to all the interviews and stuff when books came out, that she works through a lot of her own personal issues, what she's going through her life, almost through her characters. And I love that we do get a piece of that, because I feel like that helps make it resonate for so many people. And you can find yourself connecting even if you don't fully connect with Aelin. I feel like there are pieces and experiences that Aelin goes through that you can see in yourself. And I feel like because Sarah puts so much of herself and of like real world, I guess, issues or situations that can happen into these stories, I feel like you can get swept away. But you can also, I don't know, and maybe this is going to be a little too sappy, and maybe I just read a little too much in it, but it's also healing a little bit in some ways. There are some things that I read through, especially in A Court of Silver Flames, as someone who has struggled with depression most of my life. I connected with Nesta in ways that I wasn't expecting. And I feel like there were some, I don't know what to call it, acceptance, awakening, coming to terms or something that I had to deal with myself that helped, me push and take those final steps in my own mental health because of Nesta and seeing Nesta go through the work. And can you guess what book might be number one? Because I'm in tears just thinking about it, but it may or may not be number one. Maybe I'm throwing you off the bait. Ooh. This is why I love Sarah J Maas. That she can affect me. And I get very easily affected by books. I'm an emotional reader. I read for the escape of things. I rate based off of my enjoyment. I'm very easy to make cry, as you can see. There's just something about her books that really just kind of hits me. And I feel like even like in her first books with Throne of Glass, where I was like, she is young, she's making silly decisions, she's a little headstrong or cocky or whatever you want to say. There's still that underlying hidden emotion that we have to find that you can connect with. Like, and you just, or at least maybe it was just me, but I could tell there are, like, when she's making some of these rash decisions, and I know I'm focusing on Throne of Glass a lot, but I feel like that one is a series that has officially kind of ended, but we really get to see Sarah's growth as a writer throughout that series. I feel like it's such an amazing series. And maybe because I'm a very emotional person myself, I could see the signs. She's not just making these decisions. There are hurts, there are feelings, no matter how right or wrong they are, there are situations that we aren't finding out right now that are causing her to make these rash rash decisions. And yes, they're rash. And yes, we can judge her for them. But I, myself, was trying not to judge her too harshly because I could tell that there was something else there. And I didn't know what it was. And I had no idea what was coming when we found out that she was actually Aelin. But I don't know. I just really connected with her writing style and with her books. And I'm fully on the Sarah J Maas hype train. Okay, so I'm going to pause here. I'm going to go get my stack of books and bring them over here. And we are going to go through my rankings of the full-length novels of Sarah J Maas. Okay, I'm ready. Are you ready? Are we ready? Are we ready to do this? Okay, so before we get into my ranking, this is in no way final. Already this morning, I have made a couple changes from what I've had on my phone for the last couple weeks. Did some shifting. So this is obviously going to change with mood. It might change upon reread of these books, but you know, as of when I finished House of Sky and Breath in the SJM-along, I slotted in where it went on my list, on my ranking list. Like I said, there was 2 books I did move. One I moved a couple spaces, one I just moved one. So obviously this is subject to change. And if your favorite is not my favorite, that is fine. That is fine. Please don't hate me. I have some reasons why, but I also have lots of reasons why they could be higher. But it really just kind of came down to my enjoyment. I will say most of the A Court of Thorn and Roses books, well, I say most, but the first 2, when I read them for the first time, I read them and listened to the graphic audios, which was amazing. When it was time to read A Court of Wings and Fury, only the first 2 parts were out, but I have since reread Wings and Ruin. But I listened to the graphic audio, but I didn't read along with it. I just listened to the graphic audio since it was a reread. If you haven't listened to the graphic audios, they are amazing. I also listened to the Alona Andrew ones. I cannot hype up graphic audio and their production more. And it's really interesting, especially with the Alona Andrews Innkeeper series. You can really tell their growth and their production increases in that series because you've gone through more books. But I highly, highly recommend the graphic audios. If your library offers Hoopla, most of the graphic audios are available on Hoopla. They usually come out a few weeks, a month and a half-ish after it's posted on graphic audio, but eventually it will usually show up there. So just wanted to throw that little thing out there. And I don't know why I'm trying to wait and not do this, but let's just do it. Let's just get it over with. Let's just rip our souls apart and force ourselves to rank these books. So, my least favorite. That's how we're going to do this. Least favorite. And unfortunately, the bottom of the list. Crown of Midnight. This is book 2 in Throne of Glass. I knew going in that the first couple books were more YA than were more young adult than new adult, so YA over new A. But with Throne of Glass, I feel like it got a little bit of a bump over Crown of Midnight because it was new. That was the first book. That was my first Sarah J Maas book. So I feel like it got the little bump of just being something new and exciting, if that makes sense. Crown of Midnight had same vibes, but I feel like I disliked more of the choices Selena made in Crown of Midnight And I'm still not over. I am still not over Nehemiah's death. Yes, Nehemiah is on the back of this. We also have Dorian, which is super fun. I am still not over Nehemiah's death. I'm still not over it. I loved Nehemiah. I loved her to pieces. The inside, we have her sword. And the inside of this, we've got the knocker. If you know, you know. But I'm still not over Nehemiah's death. But this is the second book. So it definitely is early on in the writing journey. But, you know, I think this is also my lowest rated book. I think I gave this one 3.5 or 4 stars, but of the 4 stars I rated, this is the lowest of my 4 stars. It just didn't quite keep the same magic that the first book gave me. So, there is the bottom of the list. I hope you're not too surprised that it's one of the first couple books that she wrote. Okay, on to the second from the bottom, Throne of Glass. This one I had to put above, like I mentioned, Crown of Midnight. It's the shiny newness of it and starting the new series. And this really was just like, what's going on? And trying to figure out and learn all of what's coming and not knowing what's coming. And I really, really, really enjoyed this series. And I love this series to pieces. So it hurts me a little bit that this one's at the bottom. But I feel like after these 2 books, there was a switch that happened in Sarah J Maas's writing. I don't know if it brain-wise or whatever, or we just really, she really, put it all out there, let it all go. But these 2 were probably the least hardest to rank. But I still love them. And Throne of Glass, you know, it is the first Sarah J Maas book I read, which is fun to say that this is the first Sarah J Maas book I've read in 2022, but it was still her first book, you know, and I just can't thank Jenn enough for putting together the SJM-along and being the impetus behind me and so many other people joining the SJM hype train. But I will show you prettiness. The front, I'm guessing these are word marks. I'm guessing. And then the back, we've got Kale and Dorian. And then the inside. But I love these. And like I said, they do offer them as artworks because they are like one full piece of art. But I went ahead and just caved and got the dust jackets because I knew with the new edition covers coming out, I was like, I'll cave and buy the hardbacks. But thankfully, I do have, I'll just pull it here because I'm sitting in front of my fantasy shelf. I do have the original paperbacks, which is nice because I have the original covers of these in paperback, which is how I read most of these. Okay, so now it gets harder. Like I said, I feel like there's a switch that happened in SJM Spring, especially when we came to Heir of Fire, where she just kind of really started to put it all out there. So, third from the bottom. I don't even know how many there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. We've got 14 books here. So, number 13. Court of Frost and Starlight. This is the novella for any other author. This is just a full-length book. But this is the ACOTAR, A Court of Thorns and Roses novella, book 3.5. And this kind of bridges between the original trilogy and moving on to the rest of the world. So most of this is in Feyre and Rhys's POV. However, we do also get POVs from a couple different people. I know we get Nesta. I can't remember if we get Cassian. I think we get one from Cassian. And then we also get one from Mor, I believe. So this is where we kind of really experimented in the ACOTAR series of other POVs coming into play. Most of ACOTAR is from Feyre's POV. There are only 1 or 2, I think, chapters or scenes in the first 3 books that are from Rhys's POV. And so this was really, for this particular series, her starting to switch things over and get fans used to someone else's POV outside of Feyre's, which I think was a smart thing to do. Alona Andrews does something similar in her Hidden Legacy series as well. So I think that's a really good way to kind of bridge between when you're switching main characters, is to do like a prequel or do a novella in between the full length books to kind of get people to kind of do the handover instead of having to like take care of that in the book itself. But I thought it was super great. I mean, I gave it 5 stars. It was super fun. I hated Feyre a little bit in this. I gotta be honest. I didn't like the way that she was treating Nesta, because I definitely saw some signs that were the correct signs when I got to Nesta's book. And obviously I read this book before A Court of Silver Flames, but I disliked how Feyre was, some of the things that she was saying or doing towards Nesta. Specifically, what really kind of broke my heart and was when they kind of coerced her into coming to the Christmas celebration of the family, and then nobody kind of made it a point outside of Elaine to reach out to Nesta and to make sure that she felt included in the festivities. And yeah, she's surly, she's grumpy, and she just sat in the corner. But nobody really tried to reach out outside of Elaine. And kind of ish Cassian. Cassian didn't do it in front of everybody else. And there was situations going on there. But I just disliked that they were happy that she came, but then they didn't try to make her feel included. And I know she would have been grumpy about it, but it just broke my heart that when we were in Feyre's POV, we didn't see her even really think about reaching out to Nesta. And I know there's a point where you can't, like, if you continually reach out and somebody continually pushes you away, you have to at some point stop. But I just didn't, I really didn't like the way Feyre treated her. But maybe that was the point, to get us on, because I know that people hate Nesta. I was never a Nesta hater. I always saw the signs that there was something else going on. But maybe that was the point, to get people to hate Feyre a little bit and prepare yourselves for being in Nesta's POV. Maybe. I don't know. Or maybe I was just projecting because I've been in a somewhat similar situation before. But we will move on. So, I said that was book 13. That's book 12. So, book 11. Court of Thorns and Roses. Book number 1 in A Court of Thorns and Roses series. I liked it. I really did like it. I gave it 5 stars. I got the hype. I was on board the hype. I thought it was super fun. Like I said, the ratings after the first 2 books on where they slot in the ranking was just horrendous. I think it's interesting. I think it's very interesting how much we were on Tamlin's side in the beginning, and then things change and Tamlin has his issues. But let me just say this. I am not on the Tamlin hate train. he makes poor choices. He makes very bad decisions. He does not treat Feyre how she should be treated, especially in the second book after we deal through the ramifications of what happens in this book. But I feel like readers in general need to... I feel like the people that that weren't a part of the SJM-along, but I feel like other readers just in general who are SJM fans, I do feel like there needs to be a level of grace extended to Tamlin, because he wasn't stuck under the mountain, but he went through something pretty traumatizing himself. And I mean, let's be honest, Feyre was willing to kill him to save everyone. And yeah, the whole Heart of Stone thing, but she tried to kill him. And, you know, and he has his own levels of PTSD. And I do hope that we see at some point in the future books, I mean, I would love to have Tamlin go through his own healing journey and get his HEA. Whether we get to see that in a POV of whoever that is with him, or if it's just happening kind of on the side, I do want Tamlin to find his HEA, and I want him to go through some healing, because he has a lot of issues that he isn't really dealing with. And he would be, I mean, let's be honest, Tamlin, if he got his own book, would be like the ultimate beast in the Beauty and Beast trope. Like, I don't know. I just can't hate Tamlin. I can hate his decisions and I can hate some of his choices. But he was going through his own shit. Let's be honest. Tamlin went through a rough time. And he has PTSD. He has emotional trauma. And he, you know, he is definitely the case of trying to hold on to something so tight and not realizing that whatever you're holding on to, you're like squeezing to death, because you're just trying to hold on to it so tight because you can't handle losing it, because that might be the thing that breaks you forever, which kind of happens. Let's be honest. So I do have hope for Tamlin in the future. And it breaks my heart that, you know, he's kind of out there feeling all alone and not knowing where or how to take the steps to really heal his trauma. And I get that Feyre's our heroine and she's our main POV for these 3 books, but I do have a soft spot for Tamlin. And I'm going to throw it out there. Don't come at me, because Tamlin, he deserves as much of his own happiness as Feyre did. And I'm going to leave it at that. Okay, next. This is where it really hurts. I'm going to go with Tower of Dawn. Now, this book single-handedly made me like Kale. I hated Kale the first couple books. Like, maybe hate's too strong of a word, but I extremely disliked him. In Queen of Shadows, the book before this, I kind of was turning around on him. But here, I was just like, okay, he can be one of our secondary characters now. I mean, in this book, he was one of the main characters. So if you have not read Throne of Glass, there is a big cliffhanger that happens at the end of Queen of Shadows. And then we jump into, or no, not Queen of Shadows. Empire of Storms. My goodness, I'm going out of order. Empire of Storms is the book before this one. Now I'm confusing myself. Please hold one moment. Yes, Empire of Storms is before this one. So something huge happens at the end of that. And when we got to this book, I was like, why are we not dealing with what happened in the previous book? So that's another reason why, because I was very anxious during this book because I did not know, as well as, which kind of worked in a way because Kale, and oh my gosh, this girl, I'm spacing on her name. Is there a character list? Let's look in the back. Is there a character list or a glossary? Urine, Kale, Urine, Kale, Urine, Kale, Urine, Kale, Urine, Kale. Oh, they're talking about Aelin. Nezrin. I can't remember her partner's name, the prince dude. But anyway, it kind of worked because they go to this other continent on the world, and they're trying to get help to kind of help them deal with the big evil in the world. And they don't know what's going on. And they're like, I hope everybody's okay. I don't know what's going on with them. And so it kind of worked because as a reader, you're like, I don't know what's going on with them either. And I really want to know because I know what something did happen, aka Aelin getting captured. But they don't know either. And so it kind of worked. Urine really made this book for me. She's the healer that I talked about that we meet. And I loved that we got to see her back. We get her romance with Kale. And then we also get Nezrin's romance with one of the prince dudes. And I loved it. I liked it a lot more than, going into this, I was still kind of on Kale. And I was like, oh God. I don't know if I can handle a full book with Kale as our male main character. But Urine saved him, and Urine saved it for me. So thank you to Urine, who is queen of my heart, let's be honest. And then I will show you the inside dust cover. Super pretty. And the kitty. Kitty. And then that we got the little spider. Stygian spiders, I think. I don't know, it's been a while since I've read them, but super fun. So, Tower of Dawn. Okay. Now, you may be wondering why this book is as high as it is, especially because we've passed some good books, right? We've passed some good books. Oop. But next, whoop, I'm knocking things over. I am sorry. Heir of Fire. Now, this is book 3 in Throne of Glass. Yes, I put this over Tower of Dawn. However, there's one specific reason why. And that is this book deals a lot with grief. And I am someone who has suffered through a lot of different kinds of grief myself. And this book gutted me in the best way possible when dealing with that grief. I thought, this is where we meet Rowan, who is our HEA for Aelin, and the slow connection that is built between them is so well done. And when he finally pushes her, well, I guess he's not the one that pushes her. It's when the Vogue people show up and she kind of goes in deep inside of herself. And at that point, she really kind of is forced to come to terms with her grief and the things that she's hidden for her life since she basically became Selena. And just the discussion and how her grief is dealt with, both over the loss of her parents and pretty much everyone she ever knew, the grief over losing her position in life, the grief over losing her homeland and her magic. And there's a lot of different types of grief in this. And it really just hit me in my core. And this single-handedly, for even though I have other books later on in the series, I think if I were to go just by rating, like emotional ratings on connecting with a book, instead of doing a more overall ranking, like this I feel like is a more overall ranking and not just my emotions on books. I feel like if this was just strictly off of my emotion on a book and not also about what's going on in it and everything else, this would probably be 3 or 4 in the list. This book just really hit me. I was on board with Aelin. I was on board with Selena. I wasn't one of the people who were struggling with her as a heroine in the first 2 books. But this book still just amped it up. And like I mentioned, I feel like in this book, things explode in Sarah J Maas. And it's like she let her imagination run rampant. She finally started to kind of let loose on some of those secrets she had, on some of the backstory she had, and she really kind of let her imagination and her world building and her like fantasy elements really kind of take point and start to take over the story. And I feel like this is really, really the jumping point for her books in general. And I loved it. I loved it. So, of course, the back is Manon and Briaxis. Let me tell you, when we meet Manon in this book, I was so stressed. I was like, she better be a good person. She better be a good person. She better team up with Aelin. She better come to the good side because we need dragons. Well, technically they're wyverns, but Briaxis is our sweetest little wildflower smelling wyvern, and I love him to pieces. And when I have these displayed on my shelf, this is one of the ones I have sitting out, and I have Manon and Briaxis peeking out because this is one of the ones that is in the front, so I can see them all the time whenever I look at my bookshelves. So inside dust cover jackets, we've got more fire and snow. And on the back is just the castle kind of behind Manon. So it's the red cape. But I loved Air of Fire. And like I said, if this was just based on emotions and enjoyments of the book, this is in top tier for me. For sure. But for this ranking video, I didn't just go based off of that. Although that played a heavy part in how I rank things. Okay. Next. Queen of Shadows. Book 4. Once again, we got our Manon and Dorian. This is book 4 in Throne of Glass. And this really, I mean, I feel like here we really kind of get to see Dorian really grow. And I mean, he grows through Air of Fire, but we really get to see how his growth has happened and him really kind of start to take charge of his own destiny, I feel like, in this book. And we get Manon kind of interacting with everybody. Aelin comes back with Rowan. And this is really kind of, I feel like, where Air of Fire really kind of kicked off all of the more fantastical elements being brought into the series. I feel like this book really kicks off the plot because we've gotten through Aelin kind of accepting herself as Aelin again, really kind of doing that initial first really hard work to start unpacking her grief and everything that's happened in her life. And here is where we get really, I feel like, the plot starts moving for what's going on in the world in general. And it was just so much fun. It was just so much fun. I mean, but that's what I say about all of these books. They're just so much fun. And I think I'm just going to leave it at that because, yeah. So here we get some of the 7, some wyverns. And then our back is Adion and Lysandra. And then we've got Rowan on the inner. But no Aelin on this one. I didn't realize that before, but no Aelin on this one. Interesting. Okay, so moving on. And part of me wants to switch this. That's why I'm pausing. Okay. Oop. I just keep switching you guys, but, or hitting you guys. I don't know why I said switching. I'm going to do this one next. I'm going to do this one next. Just go with it. Just go with it. I can't change it now. I've already finalized it for this video. So I'm going to go with House of Sky and Breath next. Crescent City Book 2. These hardbacks are really heavy. This book was amazing. Why is it so low? Why is it number 7? Why is it halfway through? Even though I said this book, it's really hard, guys. It's really hard to rank these. I feel like this is kind of like a setup book. I feel like we're getting a lot of setup in this one for overarching plot stuff that's really gonna hit, and I'm assuming the final 2 books in this series. I feel like the first book was kind of similar to Heir of Fire and Queen of Shadows. I feel like the first book in Crescent City is really kind of setting up Bryce and Hunt and their character growth and really kind of getting us introduced to this new world. And I feel like the focus is mainly on Bryce in that one. But in this one, I feel like this is really kind of like the kickoff and exploding and the movement of what the plot is supposed to be overarching in this series. It ends on a crazy ass cliffhanger. I cannot wait for book 3. I also love that we got more of the side characters in this one. I mean, we get quite a bit of Rune's POV. We get Therion's POV. I mean, obviously Bryce and Hunt. I feel like I don't think we get Fury's POV, I don't think. But I can't say. It's kind of been a thing in the first 2 books in the series. And I kind of hope it doesn't happen, but if it does, I get it. It's the thing. But I hate that we're connecting in like the first chapter prologue portions of this series in particular. We're getting connected to characters. And then they're dying. Right off the bat. I don't like that. I don't like that. I am someone who gets very easily attached to my characters, and it was just sad. It was just sad. And we had quite a few possible character deaths. I know for sure we have a couple character deaths. There's a couple possible character deaths, but you know, I don't trust Sarah until we see the body. But yeah, I feel like there's a lot that really kind of plot-wise, a lot of, I don't know. If we're using a thread metaphor, the first book, it was like wool. It was still just kind of fluffy, still kind of wool, hasn't been spun or anything like that. And here, the wool is being spun into threads. It's being spun into yarn, and things are starting to get woven together and threaded together. And soon we will see what the giant tapestry or scarf or whatever it is you want to make out of your yarn or thread. We will see what the tapestry is. I'm going with tapestry. And I cannot wait to see how this all ties together. And then the cliffhanger in this of where Bryce is. And if you haven't read this book, I'm not going to say where she is. Outside of she is in some place different than where she is when we start this book. But you know, people travel. So I'm gonna leave it at that. But yeah, there's that. And we're kind of in our halfway point here. All right. The cushion I'm sitting on keeps like adjusting, although I keep moving. I'm very movie. I'm sorry. You've probably noticed that if you've seen my other move. I like talk with my hands and I move a lot. Okay, next. Elite and Lurkin. I just remembered their names. That's who I was trying to think of earlier. Seeing their faces helped me. I'm glad that I remembered their names. Okay. Next is Empire of Storms. Book 5. In Throne of Glass. This book. Still, this book. I feel like this is kind of the book that we really kind of got moving in the plot. And then, like, the plot that started getting moving in Queen of Shadows really kind of explodes here. And we really get movement forward and dealing with things. I mean, this is technically Tower of Dawn is after this. And it leads, and then we have the final book in the series. But I feel like Tower of Dawn and Empire of Storms kind of happens concurrently-ish. So I feel like, plot-wise, this feels more like the penultimate book, story-wise. Because I feel like this is like 5. And then Tower of Dawn is like 5A instead of 6, if that makes sense. So there's just so much. And this really has a lot of things kind of coming together, but not completely coming together. Like it's here and now it's like here. But there's that last little bit that needs to happen in the final book to really kind of just make things explode. And pun not intended. But it works. I just don't know what to say outside of this book. I mean, we really get a lot of more in-depth for some of our side characters, and we really kind of get to see more of what's going on in the world, I feel like. And there's a lot of like planning and situations that happen, and a lot of people here also finally get to show off some of like their powers and their magic and what's, you know, what they've been learning and growing through the previous books in the series. And this feels like everybody is reaching their peak and like just in time for the big climax in the final book. Like I feel like everybody's getting there, and it just, this is another one that is just so cinematic throughout the entire book. And I really hope Graphic Audio picks up Throne of Glass and Crescent City, but I'm more intrigued by Throne of Glass just because it does have such a cinematic feel. I mean, all of Sarah's books do, but this, I feel like this one and the last couple books in Throne of Glass really do. And I love them. So I think I'm going to leave it at that. I will show you. We've got Adian again and his father. And then inside we've got ships. And then in the front, I think that's Lysandra. Okay. Top 5. We're at the top 5. Next, I'm going to go with A Court of Thorns and Roses, book number 3. A Court of Wings and Ruin. I thought this was such a great end to like the original trilogy of ACOTAR. It once again, so cinematic, and there's so much that happens in this, and we really kind of get, even though there's more threads in the world for Sarah to pull on, I thought this was just a really great conclusion to basically the war against the King of Hybern. And we really get, now that Feyre and Rhys are like together, we really get to see them live and work and be like the ultimate power couple, which is fun. And the end, I mean, I cried in this book. I laughed in this book. There's so much that happens in this book. Like I said, I recently reread this and listened to the graphic audio, and it was so good. And yeah, it was just great. I loved it. So I don't really know what else to say, but I really like this. It obviously isn't my favorite in the series because there's still a couple books left, but I still really, really enjoyed this. And I thought it was a great way to like cap off Feyre and Rhys's portion of the story. Not that they aren't a part of future books, but I feel like as main characters, I thought this was a great conclusion for them. Okay, book number 4. I mean, it is my favorite number, but does that mean anything for this book being number 4? I don't know. But A House of Earth and Blood, Crescent City number 1. I can't wait for the special edition paperbacks of these. I definitely will probably be switching my paperback over. I'll probably give this to my sister if she wants it. And get the new paperback. And then I'll probably buy this in hardcover with this cover to match the other one, because I'm crazy like that. But anyway, I thought this was such a fun story. I had no idea what we were going into with a new series when I picked this up. I knew that people struggled with this one. They had more issues with her world building, but I didn't find myself struggling. But maybe because I've read really bad fantasies, like straight fantasies. That used to be what I read mostly in high school and college. So I just feel like this was better done. And so I didn't notice that it dragged. Like, it didn't feel draggy to me at all. I was just enamored by everything. And I love the way that we were able to learn about this new world. And I still have so many questions about it. And I loved Bryce. And once again, she went through some crap, and we had to kind of go through some healing with Bryce. And I don't know, I just love that we can go on that emotional growth healing journey with characters. And I feel like every single one that Sarah has written, we do that. And I feel like that's a big reason why her books hit people so much, is on the emotional aspect of really being able to grow and heal with the characters as you read them. Because they're not perfect. And they shouldn't be. And I love that. And I did want Bryce and Hunt to get together more, but the ending of this book, the big climax moments, really, I keep using this word, but they were so cinematic, and I had so much fun with this book. I really had so much fun with this book. And I wasn't on board at first because there was the whole party girl doing drugs, drinking all the time. I was never that person, even when I was younger. So I struggled to connect with Bryce at first. But once again, why this series has you fall in love with characters within like the first couple of pages, and then she kills them right away. Oh, Sarah. Ugh. All right. But seeing Bryce's growth through that was amazing. I loved it. And that's all I really can say. I love it. And that's probably all I can really say for these last books, but I loved it. Okay. 3 left. Top 3. in my ranking. Should I go out of order? Do you want to know them out of order? No. I'm just gonna keep doing it. I don't know why I'm like trying to tease you. Book number 3. A Court of Mist and Fairy. ACOTAR number 2. I mean, part of why this one ranks so high for me is we really get the culmination of Rhys and Feyre's romance, because I am a romance reader, or primarily a romance reader, and this is really kind of them coming to terms with their romance and coming together and really understanding each other as people, and it's just so gorgeous. And how they open up to each other, how Rhys really kind of pushes Feyre. But I love that even though he's pushing her, there are times where he just knows to back off, or that he pushed too hard. And so I love them. I love them. And that is really what kind of ups this book over the third book, is really kind of their romance and the way that Rhys goes about empowering Feyre to learn about her powers. And I love them, and I love this book. And I feel like that's how all of these are going to be. I love them, and I love this book. Okay. Book number 2. Court of Silver Flames. Are you surprised it's not number 1? Yes, I have the special edition because gray is my favorite color. And of course I had to get the one with the gray mask. I do wish there was a version of this with this style of cover, but I'm glad I waited until I could get this version instead of the weird orange and silver one. I think that color pairing look weird, but I'm glad there's this version. This book. I mean, I was crying about it earlier, so are you surprised? I connected so much with Nesta, and I mean, she's a reader, and she deals with a lot of grief, and she deals with depression and acceptance of herself. And she also has, issues with her father and their relationship. She also is still kind of really grieving over her mother. I feel like their mother isn't talked about too much. It's their mother, the Archer sisters' mother, is definitely talked about more in this book because Nesta had a better relationship with her mother over their father. But as someone who has lost their mother, who was way closer to their mother than their father, that also hit. And while I feel like we deal more with Nesta's issues, I guess, with her father, there is some talk about her and her mother. And those parts I feel like hit me a little harder just because I have lost my mother, and there was so much of myself that I could see in Nesta that, I mean, I'm crying just thinking of, or I'm tearing up. I'm not crying yet. I cried through a lot of this book because it just hit me so deeply. And they weren't bad tears. Some of them were sad tears. Some of them were just, I mean, I get stressed and I cry. I'm an easy crier. But there was just so much that just touched me in different ways. And I loved it. And there is a part in this book where one of the parts that sticks out in my brain, outside of the sleep party, and, her and her Valkyrie girls, where she is, I can't remember if she's talking with Feyre or she's just around Feyre and everybody, or she's arguing with Elaine. I can't remember exactly how this comes up, but she is kind of in her feels, and she is kind of yelling or angry or just emotional, I guess is how we're going to go. And she's just like, I think she's talking to Feyre because she's like, I am your family, whether we have a good relationship or not. I am your blood family. And you have gone and created this you have your found family now. And now it feels like I'm not part of your family. And I definitely have some similar feelings, just not in a quite the same situation. It's more, I'm more the opposite. I feel like I have more familiar, closer relationships through my own found family than I do with my real family. But that same kind of feeling of, you're supposed to be my family, that core feeling is still the same, if that makes sense. And like I mentioned earlier, this book definitely hits me very, very deeply. And Nesta is my I'm not ranking heroines. Depending on my mood, she's either number 1 or number 2. Because I connect with her so much. And then Cassian, Cassian can get it. Cassian is just, I love Cassian. But I don't know why I'm showing you the spine, but yep, it has pretty spine. I don't have as pretty dust covers, but I can't wait for the graphic audio to come out to this, and then I can cry to the graphic audio as well. So there we have it. There's our penultimate book. There's one left. If you're following along, you probably know what it is. Kingdom of Ash. This is the final book in Throne of Glass. This is our first official ending to a series. I don't know what to say about this book, because it just, it's a chunky book. This is a very heavy hardback. My muscle right here is a little sore right now, but the culmination of everything that happened throughout the series coming to a head in this book, and the strength and resilience that Aelin has. I feel like I should talk about it now while I'm still remembering. I mentioned earlier, way back when, that there's a scene in one of the later prequel novellas that hit different. Like I said, I didn't read the last 2 prequel novellas when I was supposed to earlier on in the SJM-along. So I didn't quite get the impact I feel like had I known it beforehand. But the impact still hit me in reverse when I read it. And that, I think it's in the final one. Because I read them right after each other. So they blend a little bit to me. But I think it's the final prequel novella. And Selena at that time is talking with Sam about being afraid. And he says, do you know what I do? I say, I am Sam Cortland. I will not be afraid. And when I read that, I almost started crying. Because the impact that Sam had on Aelin's life even though they didn't get their HEA, and even though Rowan is our HEA, the impact that he had on Aelin. We start this book, like I mentioned, she is captured. And pretty much the entire time she is captured, she is just like, I am Aelin Galathynius. I will not be afraid. And she says that a lot. And it was impactful. Let me tell you, it was impactful. But had I known when I read this, and when I reread this, knowing that Sam gave her those words, this book, man, this book, I'm like crying just thinking about it. What Aelin goes through in this, and I'm actually crying now. Yeah, she's a strong warrior. She has awesome magic. But her strength of will and her strength of herself is just so inspiring, I guess is the word I would use. That Aelin is my number one. With my 1A, previously mentioned being Nesta. But Aelin, I loved going on this journey with Aelin. And like I said, I planned on rereading. What I wanted to do is I wanted to reread Tower of Dawn and Kingdom of Ash. But after reading those last two prequel novellas, I definitely think I want to reread the whole series just because Aelin's story is so powerful. And going back and rereading those first books, knowing this is where she gets, this is where she ends her story, or at least that we see of her story, I feel like there's just going to be so much more. There's just going to be so much more. Am I going to go back and reread everything? I can't tell you for sure. But this had to be my number one. The culmination of everything. This book had me crying for a lot of different reasons. I'm still slightly bitter about, well, I'll just show you because I have them right here above my computer, right there. That little poster next to my Bridgerton calendar is my 13 poster. And it says, "We are the 13 from now until darkness claims us." I had seen that poster. That poster's from Enchanted Fandoms. I don't know if it's still available. I'll link them down below just in case. They also have some really gorgeous SJM couple mugs, of which I have the whole set. So I'll link them down below. But the 13 in this book. Oh, this book had me crying. This book had me crying so many times. This book had me cheering. This book had me rooting. This book had me heartbroken, but also my heart was so full and hopeful. And Aelin is my queen. Aelin, I will bow down to Aelin, and I will follow her to the ends of the earth. If I was in this world, I love her to pieces. And then, and then there's Rowan. Like I said, Sarah has really good heroes. But what makes her for me are her heroines. So, I will show you my pretty dust cover jacket. And then we've got the stag, the King of the North. The back, we have Manon and Dorian, which I would love another story about them. And I'd like to see more of how they, because they're probably one of my favorite pairings. Then we've got Flower. And I just love the dichotomy of this cover because we have Aelin and Rowan together. And then we have Manon and Dorian. Look at them. Oh. They're all my babies, and I love them all to pieces. And now that I'm like, this is number one for me. And honestly, this will probably be number one. As much as I love A Court of Silver Flames, I think this will probably be number one for a good while. Because there's just so much. And there's just so much that happens in here. And I don't want to spoil anything in case you haven't read Throne of Glass. I know that there's a lot of people who haven't really delved into this series, but I cannot recommend it itself. If you are one of the people who struggles with young adult, new adult, I myself did not struggle. But like I said, I feel like I'm also kind of a more easier going reader. But I really recommend this series. I think the overall storyline is just so magical and so all of the adjectives. It's everything. And I want to reread it. And I love it to pieces. So there we have it. There we are. There's my ranking as of, what is today? Saturday, May 13th of 2023. That is my ranking of Sarah J Maas's books. Like I said, I made some changes this morning. I may make some changes tomorrow on my list, but I really do. I've said it earlier. But I really want to extend my thanks to Jenn from the Book Refuge for creating the SJM-along and really kind of giving me that push to try to read Sarah J Maas, and as well as the other hosts. I had so much fun during the live shows chatting with everybody, and what I loved about it is there were so many different perspectives from both new readers and rereaders. And I think for sure when I reread this series, I want to go back and rewatch the live shows, and because there's just so much, and I'm sure there's even things that we all missed and didn't put together because there's just so much that happens in these books. But I think I'm going to leave it at that. We're over an hour. And I'm just really in my feels right now. So thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to leave me a comment, let me know if you've read Sarah J Maas and what your number one or even your top 3 would be of the series. And if you haven't, I highly, highly recommend you to try them. And if you're interested in reading them, I would definitely like to reread these books like I keep mentioning. So if you want to do a buddy read, I'd be down for that. But if you'd rather just leave me an emoji, leave me a sword emoji for fun. And yeah, I think I'm going to leave it at that. So thank you so much for watching. If you have not already, please like and subscribe, and I will see you all soon with another video.